Welcome to Building Apps with Mr. 636. Today we're going to build a simple chat app using Node, React, Express, and Socket.io. We're going to build this app from scratch. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by creating a new directory. I'm going to call that directory Simple Chat. I'm going to cd into Simple Chat, and then I'm going to go ahead and start creating my React app. I'm going to call this Client. Inside of Simple Chat will be another directory called Client. Creating a new React app could take a few minutes. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start building the server side. We're going to start by cding into Simple Chat, and then I'm going to make a new directory inside that directory called server. I'm going to cd into server, and then I'm going to create a new file called server.js. Next, I'm going to enter npm init-y, which is going to create my package.json files. This is where you'll find things like the list of dependencies. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to install Express, Socket.io, and Cores. I'm going to need these three packages to build the Simple Chat app. It should only take a second for these to install. So let's check in on the client real quick. We can see that this is still installing. Let's take a quick second to look at our folder structure. So if we open up, we see we have two subdirectories, client and server. Inside the server folder, we have the server.js file. We're going to be working a lot out of the server.js file. We don't need the node modules, and we really don't need to mess with the package.json files. In our client side, we have the app.js file. This is where we'll be doing a lot of work also. Primarily, most of the work done will be done in these two files. Let's go ahead and start our client-side server. We'll cd into client and we'll type in npm start. This will automatically open up localhost 3000 and our browser. This is the default page. So let's go ahead and make a slight change so we can make sure that we are working on the correct file. I'll put in an h1 tag with simple chat app. We see that the changes have been made. Next, I'm going to construct a box that our messages will be stored in, or our chat messages will be stored in. To make it stand out on the page, we'll give it some basic styling. I'm going to start with giving it a border, 1px, solid black. Next, I'm going to give it a width of 50 view width, which is going to be the viewport width, and then I'm going to give it a height of 40 view height. Next, I'm going to set overflow to auto, so that way if the amount of messages extends beyond the size of the div, it doesn't just bleed through. And finally, I'm going to give it a margin of 0 auto, just to make sure that the message box is centered. For now, I'm just going to put inside it a p tag with the word, or with the phrase message box. Let's see how this looks. All right, good enough. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is we need a way to submit new messages. We're going to use a form. Inside the form, we're going to need an input of a text, and then we don't need this name. We do need value, so we'll keep that. And we're going to also need another input type submit. So we'll put submit. We don't need name, and we'll give it a value of send. This should be all we need to build our app. But note when I hit send, it's reloading the page. We're going to want to handle this here in a few minutes. We're going to need a few more things before we actually start building the functionality of this application. We don't need this logo because it doesn't render on the page. We're going to go ahead and import useState and useEffect. We're going to import this from React. Next, we're going to initialize a couple of variables. With useState, we can unpack a variable name and a method that is used to set that variable. If you are familiar with React, this will make sense to you. We're going to set useState equal to an empty string. Next, we're going to create another variable called allMessages. This will be an array that will store all of the user messages. This is going to be useState, and we're going to set this to be equal to an empty array. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the text input value to equal new message. This is so later on we could reset the text input field by using set new message. Next, we're going to use the onChange event listener to set the new message every time the text input field is changed. We can test this by adding an h2 tag at the top and injecting new message. So real quick, if you notice when I type something, it's not updating. I'm showing you this because I do it quite often. What we have to do is we have to move that value property to the other side of the onChange event listener. Now, as I make changes, you can see that it is updating as I make changes. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to append a new message to the all messages array. We're going to do this by creating a new function called submit handler. We're going to pass in the event as e, and the first thing we're going to do is call e.preventDefault, which is going to keep the page from reloading when the form is submitted. The next thing that we want to do is we are going to actually append the new message to the front of all messages array. We do this by passing in a new array, and we're going to call a new message first, and then we're going to use the REST operator to unpack the all messages array and add every already existing message one by one. The next thing we want to do is we're going to set new message to be an empty string, and this is how we're going to reset the text field. Now, if you notice, I'll hit send. The page still reloaded. That's because I never set the on submit event listener. So we're going to set on submit equal to submit handler, and now we should see the functionality that we are looking for. I'm going to say hello, hit send, and we see that it didn't reload, and we see that the input field was reset. The next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get these messages to render in our message box. I typically will do that by checking first to see if there are any messages in the array. So I'll call all messages, and then I will use the map method to iterate over the all messages array. Now we can see that it will be expecting a callback function. The way the map method works, it will provide us with 3 parameters. The first parameter will be the value of the element, the second parameter will be the index of the element, and the third parameter will be the array itself. We are going to use the first 2 parameters. The name of these parameters is up to you, but just know that they will come out in that order that you see now. So first I will call the first parameter this message, which will refer to the current message. Then I will call index, which will refer to the index of the current message. And next I will return a p tag. So index is important because every parent element will require a key. Otherwise, React will throw an error in your console. The program will probably still run, but just be aware if you see a key value error, it's going to be referring to this property that you need to set on every parent element that is being returned. Also note you can only return one element at a time. After setting that, we can just inject this message. Now this will iterate through the all messages array and add each message in its own p tag to the message box. You can see that it's already added hello. If I add hi, it adds hi. We can remove that h2. We no longer need it. So for now, this pretty much concludes the app.js. We will return to this later. But for now, let's move over to the server.js, which is the server side. This should be pretty simple, short and sweet. The first thing that we're going to want to do is we are going to want to import our packages. So let's start with importing Express by calling const express equals require express. Then next what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called app, and I'm going to set that equal to the express function, which is basically going to give app special methods such as app.use or app.listen. Next, I'm going to set cores to be equal to require cores. Then after that, what I can do is we can set up our port variable. We're going to set port equal to 8000. The reason why I do it here is so that way if this project were to scale up and I were to use this port in multiple places, I would only have to change it here. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to use app.listen to launch the server on port 8000. But I'm also going to store this in a variable called server. I'm doing this so that way I will be able to use this variable when configuring my socket.io. My app.listen is going to be looking for two things. It's going to be looking for a port or a number to run on, and then it's going to be looking for a callback function. Inside this callback function, we can set up any functionality that we want to have run when the server is launched. For now, I'm just going to console log server is running on port 8000. Note the backticks. That is so I can use string interpolation to inject the port value. So over here, we're going to hit node server.js, which would launch our server, but every time we make a change, we would have to shut down our server and relaunch our server. I have nodemon installed globally on my machine, so I can just hit nodemon server.js, and this will launch the server. Then any changes that I make in the server while working on it, it will automatically shut down and redeploy server. So now we can move forward to configuring our socket.io. So what I need to do now is I am going to import or call, not import, I am going to set up socket equals require socket.io. Now below, I can go ahead and set app.use and put in the cores function there. Now I'm going to drop down below my server variable and I'm going to configure my socket.io. I'm going to create a variable to store the configuration called IO, and I am going to set that equal to socket. And what socket is going to be looking for is two things. It's going to be looking for the server, and then it's going to be looking for an object. Inside the object is going to be one property, and that property is going to be cores. Inside the cores property will be another object, and then inside this object we will have four more properties. First one will be origin. Second one will be methods. Third one will be allowed headers. And the last one will be credentials. And credentials will need a lowercase c, not a capital. So in origin, we are going to set an array with basically just one value in it, but that value will be the URL that will have access to this server. So in this case, it will be http://localhost:3000, which is where our front end will be running from. For methods, we'll set get and post. Allowed headers will set to be everything, and credentials will make true. Now we can start to establish a connection between the front end and the back end, or the client side and server side. We will do that with io.on. So basically the way socket.io works is out of the box there is an event that it will be listening for, and that event is called connection. So when a browser or a client connects to the server, that will trigger the connection event listener, and we can access that with io.on connection, and inside that it'll expect a callback function. Callback function will pass in socket as a parameter because we get other values and methods off of socket. We'll go into more detail on that in just a second. Right now we'll just log the socket.id, so when we connect we'll be able to see it in the console. As we can see, we're not connected just yet because there's still some more work to do. We need to move to app.js. And actually what we need to do is we need to close out our application, and we need to install socket.io-client on the client side of our application. I do not really worry about the audit problem until I'm ready for deployment, but as suggested, you could just say npm audit fix -- force. Sometimes I do not have very good luck with that. The application is relaunching, and we can see that we still have not connected yet. What we have to do to connect our front end to our back end is we have to go to app.js. We have to import IO from socket.io-client. Next thing we need to do is we need to use state to store our socket in. And we do not need to set socket other than on the actual creation, so we don't need to use set socket. But in our use state, we will pass in a callback function. And in there, we will call IO, and we will give it the port of the server that we want our front end to connect to, which would be 8000, which is what server.js is running on. So now if we look at our server, we can see a randomly generated value, which would be the socket.id that we logged from our server. So now what we want to do is we actually want to add to our submit handler, and what we're going to add is a way to send that signal or send data back to our server side. The way we will do that is socket.emit, which is how we actually will broadcast or send a piece of data to either the server side or client side. This string that I am creating is the event listener. It can be whatever you want, but it does have to match on the server side. The second piece of data is going to be the new message that I want to create and send to other clients. So in a sense, what we need is we need the event listener, which is going to be a string, and then a piece of data that we want to send with that event listener. Now back on our server side, we can drop this console log and we can add socket.on because we're listening for an event. And the event that we're listening for is the one we just created. So I will say message from, actually it's not sender, it's client, message from client. Now sometimes what I like to do is I will copy and paste this just to make sure that there's no discrepancies between my listener events, but this way I know that they're the same. And now we are going to be looking for a callback function, and in that callback function we will pass a piece of data that we are sending with the event listener as a parameter to our callback function. Now inside of our callback function, what we want to do is we'll check and see if we have the data being sent to the server from the client. Best way we're going to do that is console log the data, and we can just go ahead and test it. We'll say hello. We see that it's working correctly on our front end, and we can also see that it's sending it to the server side. So we should be able to move forward. So what we can do is we could drop this console log and we can actually try to send this piece of data back to the client side. And we will do that again with a socket.emit. I will attach a link below to go for the documentaries for socket.io because there are different ways to send signals back and forth from the server and the client. For instance, if we just say socket.emit, it's going to send a signal to all of the clients, including the one who sends the message. But if we add broadcast, such as socket.broadcast.emit, this will send that piece of data to all of the other clients except for the one who originally sent the piece of data. So we'll need to create another event listener and return the data that was originally sent, which is, in this case, the new message. So the new event listener will be message from server, and we will give it a second value, which is data, which, as I just mentioned, will actually be the new message being sent from the client, and then the server is at this point going to take that message and then broadcast it to the remaining clients, and they should all receive that piece of data, which is the new message. And that should basically finish up our server.js. So we can move back to our client side, and now we are going to use the use effect, which we imported earlier. Use effect will be expecting a callback function and an array. This array is called a dependency array. So basically what we could pass in here is any values such as new message or all messages, and any time that there's a change made to those values, it will re-trigger this use effect, and all the code inside here will run every time there's something made. In this case with socket.io, it'll also trigger the use effect anytime it receives a event that it is listening for. So in this case, if I were listening for message from server, when it is sent, it will trigger the use effect and everything inside here will run. So I will say socket.on, message from sender. I'm going to pass in a callback function, and I will give data the parameter because that is what we're returning or what we're sending along with that event listener. So here you will think that what we could do is like what we did below, and we could just say data and then use the REST operator and pass in all messages. Well, actually, this needs to be in an array. It can't just be out in the open like that. Now with socket.io, it doesn't quite work like this. What we would actually have to do to set all messages to work correctly is we have to actually present it as a callback function. When using socket.io in conjunction with useState, the first parameter's value will be provided for us. And that current value is going to be the value stored in the state that we are currently trying to set. This parameter can be named anything you would like. I am going to call mine previous messages. So to recap, what's going on is when I set all messages, I'm passing in this callback function with the parameter of previous messages. The previous messages is equal to the all message array. And what I am doing is now I'm going to pass in data first, like we did below, and then I am going to use a REST operator with previous messages to unpack what is essentially the all message array into the new array and set that equal, or set all messages equal to that. So now what we can do to test this out is we can go ahead and open up a new window. It doesn't have to be an incognito window. I only do that for good practice in case I was working with servers and you store your server in session or in cookies. Sometimes if one's not an incognito, it will make both browsers equal the same. So if we look, we can see that every time I send a new message, the receiver of that new message is getting it twice. And there's a reason for that, and it's a simple fix. What we need to do is we need to go to our client side and we're looking for index.js. If we look, we have this react.strict mode. This is good for debugging during the production stages. If we just simply remove that, we will see that that actually fixes our problems. Let's go ahead and send a new message, and we see that the recipient received it once, and it works both ways. Now we have real-time communications. So that basically will conclude our simple chat application. I will include the link to the source code below in the description. If you would like to see me change something about this application or add something to this application, please drop it in the comments below. If you like this video or if this video helped you out, please go ahead and like the video, comment on the video, subscribe to my channel, or even hit the notification bell. Other than that, until next time, we'll be seeing you.